Imagine you're on a supersonic bullet train, right? Just tearing across the landscape at like 1,000 miles an hour.
Oh, I can picture it. It's a total marvel of engineering.
Exactly. But if you walk through the passenger cars, nobody is looking out the windows. Like, nobody is preparing for the destination at all.
Let me guess, they're completely distracted.
More than distracted. They are having an absolute brawl in the aisles, just screaming at each other over who gets the window seat, throwing luggage over the color of the upholstery, just totally consumed by petty grievances.
Wow. And meanwhile, who is driving this thing?
Right. The train is hurtling toward this massive intersection, and the people supposed to be steering are too busy arguing about a slight from 50 years ago to even check if the track is actually clear.
It's a terrifying image, honestly, because you have this absolute pinnacle of collective human achievement, the train itself completely overshadowed by the internal chaos of the occupants.
Yeah, the vessel is practically science fiction, but the passengers are operating on, well, Stone Age emotional hardware.
Which is a perfect metaphor for what we are getting into today.
Exactly. And that jarring disconnect, the gap between how advanced our tools are and how emotionally fractured our society remains, is the core of what we are unpacking in today's deep dive.
And we have some really fascinating, honestly intense source material to share with you today.
We really do. It's a short manifesto written from the perspective of the year 2026. The author is credited simply as MGM.
Yeah, reading it, you really feel this overwhelming, frustrated urgency. It acts as this massive wake-up call to a species that seems to be entirely missing the point of its own progress.
It is incredibly passionate. Okay, let's unpack this because right out of the gate, MGM explicitly dedicates this entire argument, quote, for all newborns' sake.
Which sets the stakes right away. The author isn't just complaining about the state of the world to hear themselves talk.
Right, there is this fierce, protective desperation to fix things before the next generation inherits a completely broken system.
And to really understand that deep frustration, we first have to look at the absolute absurdity of the contrast MGM sets up between our tech and our talk.
Oh, it is a massive chasm. Let's get into the specifics of that contrast because MGM lays it out so brilliantly.
Yeah, the author points out that humanity split the atom ages ago.
Right. We've figured out how to unlock the fundamental building blocks of matter. And now, according to this text, we are standing on the absolute threshold of AGI.
Artificial general intelligence,
Right.
a machine intellect that could rival or even surpass our own.
Exactly. Yet, despite holding literal godlike technological power, MGM points out we are still hopelessly bogged down in arguing over things like, well, flat Earth and genders.
It's an intentional, almost brutal juxtaposition by the author.
It really is.
You have quantum-level physics and the dawn of a new superintelligence on one hand, and on the other, you have people legitimately debating the physical shape of the planet.
It's totally absurd. It feels like we are successfully building a warp drive spaceship, but the crew is in the cafeteria throwing mashed potatoes at each other over whether the ship is a sphere or a cube.
That is a great way to put it.
But reading this, I have to ask you, does the author want us to just stop debating societal issues entirely to focus on tech? Like, are they saying, hey, forget human culture, let's just all be emotionless robots and build the AGI?
No, and what's fascinating here is how carefully MGM draws that distinction. Because as per the text, the author states that the problem is not the arguing itself.
Oh, okay. So debate is fine.
Right. Debate, cultural friction, sorting out our societal norms, those are inevitable for a diverse species. The true issue, according to the author, is the guilt, fear, and shame that comes with it.
So it's not the actual disagreement, it's the emotional warfare we wage during the disagreement.
Precisely. And MGM claims this leads to what they call endless generational trauma.
Generational trauma, wow.
Yeah, when we weaponize our debates, we aren't just blowing off steam. We are actively inflicting psychological damage on one another. And because we never resolve it, that trauma becomes a cultural inheritance.
It's like we are trying to run a next-generation AGI operating system on a motherboard that has been physically corroded by malware from our ancestors.
That is exactly it. We are passing down the blueprints for splitting the atom, but we are also handing these newborns a deeply diseased emotional framework.
Which means they will have the power of gods, but the emotional regulation of toddlers.
Which is a terrifying combination.
Quick time out here, though, because I want to be super clear with you, the listener. In this deep dive, we are absolutely not taking a side on the cultural debates mentioned in the text.
Right, whether it's the flat earth theory or the complex discussions around gender.
Exactly. Our job today is strictly to analyze how the author uses these specific, highly charged examples to prove a point. MGM uses them as a mirror to highlight humanity's distracting emotional turbulence, not to litigate the topics themselves.
I'm glad you brought that up because the specific topic of the argument is almost irrelevant to MGM's broader point.
It's more about the bandwidth it takes up, right?
Exactly. When an entire global society is running on an engine fueled by guilt, fear, and shame, it loses its objective lens on reality.
It loses the ability to prioritize what actually matters for survival.
And this emotional and intellectual disconnect doesn't just stay in our heads. It physically manifests in how we distribute the very real, massive resources of our planet.
Which brings us to the author's stark economic math, which is just
Sobering.
sobering is the perfect word for it. The statistics presented in the text are meant to be a cold splash of water to the face. Let me lay out the exact numbers MGM provides.
Go for it.
We, as a global society, currently run on 110 million barrels of oil every single day.
Which is a massive amount of energy.
Massive. And we boast a $120 trillion annual global GDP. 120 trillion. And with that wealth, we're literally installing data servers in space.
Just think about the sheer scale of that infrastructure for a second. The coordination, the engineering, the capital required to maintain space-based server farms. It is historically unprecedented.
It proves we're capable of nearly impossible logistical feats. But then comes the hammer drop.
The sobering reality.
Right. Despite this $120 trillion economy, despite our space servers, we somehow cannot secure basic sustenance for 800 million human beings.
And MGM points out the cost to do that would be a mere $40 billion a year.
Just 40 billion. I want you to visualize that fraction for a second. If you're listening to this, try to scale that down to a personal budget.
It's a tiny, tiny percentage.
It's roughly 1/3000th of our 120 trillion global GDP. That is the equivalent of someone making 100 grand a year and utterly refusing to spend $30 to save a dying person on their doorstep.
When you put it like that, it's just sickening.
It is. So what does this all mean? The author places space data servers right next to global hunger. Is this a critique of technology itself? Like, should we scrap the space program and just buy tractors?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is definitely not an anti-technology manifesto. The author isn't saying space servers are an inherent evil.
Okay, so what is the actual critique then?
It's a critique of resource allocation. The author is highlighting a profound failure of collective human prioritization.
So it's about our choices.
Exactly. The math synthesizes it perfectly. 40 billion is a microscopic drop in the bucket of 120 trillion GDP. MGM is suggesting we have the absolute, undeniable material means to solve basic survival, but we completely lack the unified will to do it.
Because we are too busy in the cafeteria throwing mashed potatoes.
Yes, the endless arguing over cultural grievances distracts us from the solvable crises right in front of us. We are a species capable of engineering miracles, yet we suffer from a completely self-imposed paralysis.
That is deeply unsettling. It's one thing to say vaguely, oh, humanity has problems. It's entirely different to look at the hard math and realize we could theoretically solve global hunger before the weekend, but we just choose not to.
Because we're too busy fighting.
Right. So if our resources and our focus are this tragically misaligned, how does MGM propose we fix it?
Well, the answer lies in a highly unusual recipe for finding universal common ground. And I mean highly unusual.
You can say that again. I want to highlight one of the most intriguing sentences in the text. Ready for this?
Hit me.
MGM writes, let's interpolate religions, epigenetics, and quantum mechanics and get on with it.
It is quite the triad to throw at the reader, isn't it?
That is a wild dinner party. A theologian, a geneticist, and a quantum physicist walk into a bar. I mean, why these three specific fields?
It sounds like a generic sci-fi word salad at first glance, I know.
Exactly. It sounds like someone just threw big words into a blender. How does this actually solve anything?
Well, let's break down the synthesis. The author isn't asking humanity to abandon its roots. In fact, the text explicitly says, let's keep our unique individuality and religious cultures.
Right. They aren't saying ban religion or erase local culture. They actually see value in protecting that uniqueness.
Exactly. However, the author demands we also, quote, gather on the undeniable truths on how reality works.
Okay, so gathering on undeniable truths. How do those three specific fields get us there?
Because MGM sees bridging the spiritual, which is religions, the biological, which is epigenetics, and the fundamental physical nature of the universe, which is quantum mechanics, as the absolute key.
Let's really break this synthesis down because it's the crux of the whole manifesto. Let's start with quantum mechanics.
Sure.
I know it deals with probabilities, entanglement, the microscopic behavior of matter, but how does knowing that particles exist in a state of probability stop me from screaming at my neighbor about politics?
Because quantum mechanics forces us to acknowledge a shared fundamental physical baseline. It proves that at the most granular level, the universe is deeply interconnected.
Okay, so it's an objective reality.
Right. It's governed by rules we cannot negotiate with or debate away. MGM is saying we are currently arguing over the shape of the room while completely ignoring the atomic structure of the walls. Quantum mechanics provides the undeniable physical stage we are all standing on,
Okay, that makes sense. That's the physical reality. Then MGM brings in epigenetics.
which is the biological consequence.
Right. Now, for anyone who needs a quick refresher, epigenetics studies how your behaviors and your environment can cause changes that affect the way your genes work.
It's not changing your DNA sequence, but changing how your body reads that sequence.
Exactly. So why is this biological piece part of the solution?
Remember that generational trauma we talked about earlier?
Oh, yeah. The malware passed down to the kids.
Exactly. It's not just a poetic metaphor. Epigenetics shows us that when we weaponize our debates, when we marinate our society in guilt, fear, and shame, that extreme stress literally, physically imprints on our biology.
Wow. And we pass those altered stress responses down to our children.
Yes, which connects perfectly to the for all newborns' sake dedication.
Oh, that makes so much sense now. MGM is pointing out that our bickering isn't just annoying, it is a literal biological hazard.
Right. When you understand epigenetics, you realize your petty societal warfare is actively coding trauma into the hardware of the next generation. It makes the stakes of our arguments undeniable.
So we have quantum mechanics giving us the undeniable physical reality, and epigenetics giving us the undeniable biological reality.
Exactly.
But then religions. Why throw religion into a mix with hard physical and biological sciences?
Because science tells us what is happening and how it happens, but it really struggles to tell us why it matters. Religions represent our deepest historical attempts to derive meaning, ethics, and a moral framework. If quantum mechanics is the stage and epigenetics is the biological actors, religion and culture are the story being told.
So by interpolating them, by forcefully combining the physical, biological, and spiritual, the author is saying we create a complete bulletproof picture of reality.
Yes. MGM is arguing you cannot understand the human condition or solve our paralysis without all three. Once we synthesize them, we achieve a clear understanding of how reality works.
And once we have that unified baseline, a foundation that isn't based on arguing over flat Earth, but on undeniable interconnectedness, then what? What's the next step?
Well, once we have that, the text says we can extrapolate it however we want in our own backyard.
In our own backyards. I love that.
It means once we agree on the absolute fundamental facts of existence, you can go back to your unique culture, practice your religion, live your life. But the underlying operating system must be grounded in reality.
It takes these massive, intimidating concepts, quantum entanglement, global GDP, epigenetics, and brings them right to your front door. It's about how you treat the people around you, how you raise your kids.
Exactly.
But finding this unified truth isn't just an abstract philosophical exercise for the author, is it? Like, we aren't just trying to achieve inner peace here.
Not at all. There is a terrifying ticking clock underlying every single word of this manifesto.
Here's where it gets really interesting and, honestly, incredibly dark. Because right as the author is talking about finding common ground, they drop the bleakest statistic in the whole text.
It is a rough one.
Globally, as a species, we possess over 12,000 nuclear warheads.
12,000. And it only takes a tiny, tiny fraction of that number to fundamentally alter the trajectory of all biological life on Earth.
We are sitting on an arsenal that could end the world 100 times over, and we are doing it while we are bickering, while we are completely consumed by guilt, fear, and shame.
It really is like handing a loaded machine gun to a toddler who is in the middle of a massive temper tantrum.
That is exactly what it feels like. And the text makes it clear that the danger is only accelerating. The urgency is driven by the sheer unyielding speed of the technological eras we are about to enter. I want to read the author's exact quote here. Technology is going faster than we can comprehend it.
This raises an important question, right? What happens when a society that hasn't even mastered its own basic emotional regulation gains total mastery over the fundamental forces of nature?
It's a recipe for disaster.
The author states, quote, We cannot afford to stroll, bickering our way into the age of AGI, automation, quantum computing, biotechnology, and space exploration.
Strolling and bickering. It's such an evocative phrase. It implies this total lack of seriousness. We are wandering into a minefield while arguing over a text message.
Because MGM views our current state holding 12,000 nukes while dealing with generational trauma and arguing over basic reality as fundamentally incompatible with surviving the immense power of the upcoming technological age.
Right. You cannot safely navigate the complexities of artificial general intelligence if you are still debating basic scientific realities.
Exactly. You cannot safely manage advanced, world-altering biotechnology if your society is driven by inherited trauma and unchecked fear. The margin for error used to be wide, now it is shrinking to absolute zero.
It brings us right back to that bullet train analogy from the beginning. We are building a train that goes 1,000 miles an hour, but the people steering it are throwing luggage at each other.
A catastrophic crash isn't just a possibility, it's a mathematical certainty, unless someone grabs the wheel, stops the fight, and actually looks at the tracks.
And AGI just scales up the chaos, doesn't it? If you have a broken society, AGI just gives you a perfectly optimized broken society.
That is the ultimate warning here. The nukes are the existing threat, but the incoming waves of automation and AGI represent a total paradigm shift. Technology won't act as our savior, it will just act as an amplifier for our dysfunctions.
So I want to turn this directly to you, listening right now. Think about your own backyard, as the author puts it. How does this 2026 perspective reframe the things you find yourself arguing about on a daily basis?
It is a deeply uncomfortable but necessary lens to apply to your own life.
It really is. When you look at your own priorities, your own stresses, the things you post online, how much of your bandwidth is spent generating the guilt, fear, and shame the author warns about?
And how much of it is spent seeking an undeniable, grounded truth of how reality actually works? Are the petty things we fight over today going to matter even a little bit when AGI arrives?
Or are we just generating more useless noise in a system that desperately needs clarity to survive? That is the big question.
It certainly is.
So let's provide a concise wrap-up of what we've unpacked in this deep dive. The author, MGM, has presented a stark mirror for the year 2026.
A very harsh mirror.
They've shown us a civilization that is capable of splitting atoms and installing complex data servers in the vacuum of space, yet somehow still starves millions of its own people.
All because it won't allocate a microscopic fraction of its wealth to save them. It's a portrait of a civilization bickering aimlessly, driven by guilt and fear, rather than a clear understanding of reality.
It's a massive plea to wake up, to stop scrolling and start paying attention to the monumental existential shifts happening right under our feet.
And before we go, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought that builds on the text but wasn't explicitly discussed today.
Oh, lay it on us.
The author notes we are on the verge of artificial general intelligence and points out our $120 trillion GDP versus our failure to feed 800 million people.
All right. It's right there in the data.
Consider this, when that artificial intelligence finally wakes up and analyzes this exact historical data, how will it judge the creators who valued space servers over the sustenance of their own species?
Wow.
If we want an AGI that values human life, we might first need to mathematically prove that we value human life.
That is chilling. If we don't fix the math, the machine will absolutely notice. What an incredible point to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this perspective has given you something profound to chew on. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep striving to understand reality. Take care.